So this video is going to go over our Projectwise managed workspace, and more specifically, how we configured our Connect Edition workspace inside our managed workspace. So the goal here was to mimic our workspace that we had set up outside of Projectwise. So I do want to mention that, just like in the other videos, we are working on a way to deliver our managed workspace, at least in terms of setting up the Connect configuration, so you guys can easily set up a managed workspace and easily update it if needed. So we're working on that right now, so that's coming down the pipeline. So this video is going to give you more background on how to set it up, and get you guys started if you need to set something up here. So looking inside our data source, we have a standards folder to maintain it, to hold all of our standards, and then inside there we put a CAD standards folder. So this is where we're going to house all of our CAD standards. And so if we look at what's inside that folder, we have a Connect config folder for all of our Connect configuration. We put our OHDOT CAD, which is our V8i standards, right there. And then we have this migration versions config file. So this migration versions config file is really what's controlling whether or not migration should load a Connect configuration or a V8i configuration. Okay, so that's really going to be our starting point. Okay, but inside Projectwise, putting the file there, that's just putting a file there. In terms of a managed workspace, we still need to tell Projectwise how to run this config file as part of our managed workspace. So that can be done over in Projectwise Administrator by setting up a configuration setting block. And so in Administrator, if you look, we're going to create a predefined configuration block. So you notice these are the different levels of configuration with the Bentley products. So we're going to create a predefined block. And what this predefined block is going to do is it's actually going to call that migration versions config file that I'm talking about right here. Okay, so the configuration block will call this file, which this file then kicks off our configuration. Okay, so how do we set this? We just have a block. We set a variable to look for, or to set it to our CAD standards folder, and then we set another variable to specify that config file I'm talking about. And then we just check to see, does this config file exist? If it does, include it. If not, throw an error. Okay. So this is how we're starting our managed workspace. So we created a block. Now a block by itself doesn't do anything, just like a config file doesn't do anything by itself. So the last step that we have to do here is we have to associate this block to something. So you can associate to Projectwise folder, but in our case, the way we're setting this up is we're going to actually assign this block to the whole data source itself. So this is done within Administrator. And so if I go to Administrator and I go to my data source and I click Properties, and in the Properties I go to the Manage Workspace tab, I see all my levels, and right now nothing's defined. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on the predefined, I'm going to hit Add Association. And then I get this little block, or a setting block picker, and all of my blocks for a predefined level will be shown here. And I can select the one I want, which is the only one I have. I'll hit OK. And so now my data source as a whole has a predefined block defined for it. So anytime I try to launch, one of the Connect, or actually any of the Bentley products here that launch a DGN, it's automatically going to start my managed workspace by loading this block file. So no matter where I'm at in my data source, this is going to get called anytime I try to open that DGN file up. Okay, so let's take a closer look here. So if I go and I look inside the migration versions config file, again, this is what's being kicked off by the block file when I open a new DGN file. Okay, so in here I just have a simple if statement that says if defined version 10.0. That basically means did I choose to open this dgen file with a Connect Edition product, Migration Connect or a dconnect? So if I did, then I want to set the USTN configuration variable. Okay. If not, I'm going to go down to this else statement. And so if you didn't launch it through the Connect Edition, well, did you launch it through the V8i edition? And if you did, then I'm going to go and load my V8i standards, right? By setting some variables and doing things. But we're not going to go over that. We're going to focus in on the Connect Edition stuff in this video. Okay. So what we're doing here is setting the USTN configuration value. And if you remember back in the previous videos that went over how to set up, Connect Edition outside of Projectwise, we were setting a custom configuration variable. But if you look inside there, inside that configuration setup config file, after you set the custom configuration or the variable, it then sets that equal to the USTN configuration variable, which is what we're doing right here. So pretty much the same thing we're doing outside. And so setting this USTN configuration variable will kick off all of the MicroStation standard configuration. So it's going to follow suit the same way as if you were outside Projectwise. Okay, so hopefully this makes sense so far. So if we go and we move on, so we're setting this location, the configuration location to this connect config folder, right? So inside there we have organization and a workspaces and a workspace setup config file. Should look fairly familiar to what we had outside because it's the same setup. Okay, so just like outside of Projectwise, if you have your organization and your workspaces folder right here inside your configuration location, those are the default values. So you actually don't need a workspace setup config file if you're going to have these here because those are the default values. So you could get away with not using that if you're going to use the defaults. So if I take a look inside my workspaces folder, I can see I have two different versions of the OHDOT standards here for Connect Edition. Okay, so this is following suit with the standard default migration configuration. We set that configuration location, kicked off all the standard migration stuff. So migration now knows where to look for workspaces, right? Because that's the default workspace folder. So migration knows where to find the workspaces, right? But we're not opening this through the migration dialog, so we can't select a workspace. We selected a DGM. So the next part would be how do we tell our managed workspace that we want to use this specific workspace when I open this file? So that's the next step. So right now we know where the workspaces are. The configuration could find it because that's the default value. If you moved it somewhere else, you obviously would have to set it in the workspace setup. But ultimately at this step, the configuration knows where the workspaces exist. Okay, so how do we set up our workspace for OHDOT? Well, we're going to go back to our configuration blocks. But this time, so we're in administrator, we're going to go to the workspace level, and we're going to create a configuration block. Okay, so what this configuration block is going to do, it's going to set the workspace name. So this name should be the same name as the folder and the config file for your workspace, which we'll get to in a second here. And then I'm going to lock it. So I'm just locking that value. Okay. So I have a configuration block set up that says, okay, use this workspace, right? But a block by itself doesn't do anything. We still have to, assign it or associate it in some way. So, with the predefined block we made, we assigned it to the whole entire data source. Now with the workspace, you don't want to do that because you get multiple workspaces, right? So you can see right here I have two different block files, one for different versions of, but you could have one for different DOT standards, right? So what I'm going to do in this case is I know that I have a template for creating projects with our standard or work sets. So I'm going to go to where I have that template folder structure, and I'm going to right click on that. I'm going to add association to it, So I'll right-click Properties, you go to Manage Workspaces, and you can see there's the one that's inherited, the predefined. So if I go to Workspace, Add Association, I'm going to select what workspace I want to use with this template. So after I have that assignment, now whenever I go to create a new project, I'm going to use this template to create it. And the template, since the template already has this OHDOT workspace defined in it, then anytime I open a file inside that, it will already know to use this workspace. So hopefully that made sense to you. That was kind of a long explanation, but that's how it's working. So now when I create a new project, I know that when I open a file within that project, I get this workspace. So this could be used for, if you have a different template for a different standard, you would just apply that block to that template. So now the configuration knows how to get to the workspace, but we still have to get to the work set, right? Because we're not in MicroStation where we can just choose it in the dropdown. Okay, so how do we do that? We are doing that through the workspace config file. Okay, so before we get too far, I just want to note how our projects are set up. So inside Projectwise, we have a work area as our main PID folder. But in the folder structure, we do have sub work areas. So if you guys are new to Projectwise, you should know that a work area is different than just a regular folder. So for our PID folder, our main project folder, we're making that a work area. And so in terms of MicroStation, that is a work set. Okay, so in the configuration, we need to tell the configuration how to find that work set, right? So if we look at our workspace config file, so again, we found this because our block file said use this workspace by the name. Okay, that name matched up with this config file inside of our workspaces folder. So setting the name gave the configuration the ability to find this workspace config file. So inside this workspace config file, we're doing a bunch of stuff. And so the first thing we're doing is we're looking at the current location of the file that you're opening, and we're checking to see if it has a parent project. And so it says parent project, but that really stands for work area. So again, we have two work areas within our project. So we're trying to figure out if we are inside, if our file we're opening is inside this work area or right here. So when I go and look for the parent work area, I'm going up to two work areas. So if my DGN file is inside this work area, the work area is this, so we'll go up and find the work area, and then to find that parent of that work area would go up again. Okay, we don't have a work area higher than this work area. So basically, I'm checking two levels up. If I find a work area, then that should be my work set, right? If I don't, then only go up one level, and that should be my work area. So that's what this is doing. Case 1, you're in a sub work area, so I need to go up 2 to find that work set. And so the way Projectwise is working is we're actually defining our work set, which is also our work sets root. So they're the same location, but in order to get the configuration to work correctly, we need to set the work sets root here, which just so happens to also be our work set. So because there's only one work set at this work sets root. Okay. So that's what this if statement is doing. So it's just checking. So this can be applied to go check more levels if needed. But that's kind of, this could give you the starting of how you could do this. And then the other thing I'm doing is within Projectwise, what we have decided to do is put our workspace config, put our work set config file inside of our work area or work set, as well as the dgnws file to be within that PID folder or work set folder. These aren't the default locations, so we have to specify them. And so we're doing that in our workspace config file. And so you can see right here, we are setting the work set config file to be within our work set's root and named the work set name, which we set right here. Okay, so basically we are finding our work set, and then we're saying our config file is inside of our work set. So hopefully that makes sense. So we have now found our work set. So now that we found our work set, we can run the work set config file, right? So that's the next step would be. So inside the workspace, we are doing some other things. So just showing that we set some more stuff inside that. So just like outside, we are calling a main config file. So that's right here. So just like outside, inside of our standards config, we have our main config file. So that's how that's working. So now that we're in our work set, since we told the configuration, here's how to find our work set, and here's how to find the work set config file, it's going to run through our config file for that work set. And so the important thing to note here is that we are setting two important variables here. One is to make sure you set your work set root equal to your work set's root here, since we're using them at the same level. And two, make sure you set that work set dgnws to the non-default location, which is inside of our work set. That way, all the files with the work set are together. So that's how we're doing the work set. So I kind of walked you through how the configuration could find that first to start the config with connect, then how to find what workspace it's using, and then from there how to find what work set it should use, all based off of what you clicked, from where you clicked, that directory you clicked. And so here kind of recaps that as more of a high level review. So that's how we set it up. Hopefully, if you have questions, I'm sure there's going to be questions because that was a lot to take in. But I do want to go over how we are creating work sets inside Projectwise, since we can't use the out-of-the-box stuff that we did for outside Projectwise. It doesn't work. Okay, so you need three things to create a work set. You need the folder template, you need the work set config file, and you need the work set dgnws file, right? So here's the steps to create a project manually. First, create a new work area, and when you create that work area, you're going to select your folder template. So that would be creating the project directory structure. That's where your dgens, your Excel files, all that's going to be stored. Okay, so we're just going to create that as a work area, and we're creating it from a template. So we got one of the things. So what we don't have is the work set config file. So what we're going to do is we're just going to copy the work set config file from the template area and just paste it inside of the newly created work area and just name it as the name of the work area. So we got two. Now the last part is a little bit harder. We can't just copy and paste a dgnws around it. There's stuff inside the file that needs to be updated. So what we're going to do is we're just going to let MicroStation create it. And so the way this works is the first time the user opens a dgen file within your newly created work area, it's going to go and look for the dgnws file, right? Because we told it where to look for it right here. This USTN works as dgnws, but it's not going to find it because it's not there, right? So if it doesn't find it, it's going to recreate it, and it's going to look at this variable right here, this USTN workset dgnws template. So whatever you have defined there, it will use that as the template dgnws and will recreate it in your project. So now you have a new work set created that you can use within Projectwise. So I do want to mention that OHDOT has created an application to streamline this process and to also set up access control for the project within Projectwise, or I should say work area, which is also a work set. So internally we have created an app that we can't release it because it's really specific to us with the access control. So it really wouldn't make sense to release. But right now, that's the steps of how to do it. Okay, so I mentioned earlier we're going to work on a delivery method. We want to simplify the setup process for you guys. I'm thinking of a sync tool, similar like what we have outside Projectwise. But what are you guys looking to get? Initially, we're thinking you guys probably don't want our environments because you'll have your own. You don't want workflows because you have your own. And when we set up attribute exchange rules, but we have the sheet manager, so we don't really need it anymore. We just use the sheet manager. All right, so that is how we set up Projectwise or manage workspace. So hopefully you guys followed it. But that concludes this video series. So in the future, we'll probably add some videos here for when we ever get our delivery stuff done. But thanks for watching.